Well, this goes back about a year before I went in the military. I was working at Schweitzer's Aircraft Corporation, gliders. Pretty much it was my first job I ever had. Yeah, I'd done graduated high school and moved out of the house, lived in Penyan, and I got a job working at Schweitzer's Aircraft Corporation by Chemung County Airport. They built gliders. It was owned by three brothers, and Amara, New York is known as the glider capital of the world. Harris Hill, they take gliders up, and there's a biplane that pulls them up, takes them up to, I don't know, 30,000 feet, and then releases them, and, you know, gliders. Well, anyways, I worked at the bench press, and I bought a toolbox and started making my tool collection. It was payroll deduction. Joe worked in the tool room. He took care of that. Orvis Swisher was my boss, and he knew my Grandma Hazel. I found that out in the lunch period one day. But what I'm going to talk about today is a German. Otto Dusseling was a German. He lived up by Keuka Lake. He was a semi-farmer. He grew tomatoes and corn and had a few grapevines. He was pretty self-sufficient. And during the lunch hour, you had to clock out lunch for an hour, clock back in, and go back to work. Well, I worked at the bench press. Otto worked about 20 feet from me, and the man that worked next to him was Art. Art was a farmer in Wellsboro. Otto lived 20 miles north, I lived 15 miles north, and Art lived 20 miles south of Schweitzer's Aircraft Corporation. So my Uncle Bill also worked. My mother's younger brother was a drafter for Schweitzer's. But Uncle Bill worked days, I worked nights, 4 to 1 o'clock. We used to eat between 8 and 9. I think that's why I created a habit of eating supper between 8 and 9. But anyways, Otto was a talker. He loved conversation. He loved America. But his military career was interesting. He was in Aflacher, German Air Force. And he was an ace. He said that he's shot down probably 15 Brits, 5 or 6 Americans, and he was proud of his service that he did for Germany. But he was also glad that the war ended the way it did, where the United States helped Britain defeat Germany. He was real happy about that because he hated Hitler. He despised Hitler. He was joking one day and said that if he had an extra bomb and he knew where Hitler was, he'd drop the bomb on him. But anyway, that was Otto. Anyways, Art, my brother, was a pilot. And I just so happened to be eating with Otto and Art this one supper, and Art was asking Otto about the Americans that he shot down. Well, come to find out, Otto shot down and killed Art's brother during the war. And that was over a 4-day period, because Otto had in his memoirs all the flights that he flown and his accommodations of who he shot down and when and the day, and all the documents, to require proof that he did what he did. Well, he had all those records, and he brought them in one night, and I was curious because I've seen American documentation like that, but I've never seen German, especially in the German language. So I'm looking at it, and Otto's translating the stuff into American. Well, Otto started with this one American that he had trouble shooting down, and the dog fight that they ended up in, and the American almost got Otto, but Otto got him instead because of wind shear. Wind shear that the American went through, and the American dropped like 1,000 feet, which put him right in Otto's range, and Otto just pulled the trigger and blew the man out of the sky. But they kept records of side numbers of the aircraft and documentation of squadrons that the aircraft was in, and it was pretty interesting, because the very next night Art brought in the documentation dealing with his brother, and Otto walked out to his car, brought in the briefcase with all his paperwork, and they compared notes. And sure enough, between what Art brought in and what Otto brought in, yeah, Otto shot down and killed Art's brother because of wind shear. And wind shear during the Second World War was not really known, according to Otto, because it was something new that planes never got involved in that much, but when they did, they just dropped. Nobody knew the reason why, so they just put this thing called wind shear as a name for it, and that name stuck to it. But here's the funny part about it. We had an inspector. Now I can't think of his name. On his hand right here was a number. He was a Jew, and he was in a concentration camp. And by the time he got to the concentration camp, he was in next to the last train that went there before the concentration camp got rescued by the American Army that was over there. And according to him, he said it was just a matter of days and he would have been cremated, put into the gas chamber and cremated, which meant, his gold teeth would have been taken out of his mouth, and all of his valuable body parts would have been taken. But that's, to me, that's real life. But anyways, Art and Otto were the best of friends, and Art never said a bad word concerning Otto. Otto had nothing but praise for Art's brother because of the way he fought the airplane and the way he flew the airplane. Art's brother was also a ace, So it was just that freak incident with wind shear that brought Art's brother to his death. But I just thought I'd throw that out. Schweitzer's Aircraft Corporation laid me off, and they lost a contract or something. I can't recall exactly what it was, but people that were hired within the last year, were laid off. They went by time you worked, and then they'd call you back when they got the jobs for you. But it was piecework. The jobs you had 20 to do in 1 hour, or 10 to do in 1 hour. And there was one part of a glider that said 3 an hour, but you can only do about 1 every 2 hours because of the shrinkage of the metal, and you're using a lead pipe to shrink the metal. It took more than what they were allotted. So the day shift and I guy would work on that project when we got ahead of the other ones, because him and I got together and decided to take our time with those in order to do them right. But to tell the truth, if we could do 50 an hour and it calls for 20 an hour, hey, do 50 an hour, and say it took you 3 hours to do it, or 2.5 hours to do it. That way you would have an hour and a half to work on this thing that they said you could do 3 an hour, and you were lucky to do half of one in 3 hours. So, the day shift and I got together, like I said, we talked about it. Well, we got those 20 done, and he took credit for half, and I took credit for the other half, so that went through all right. But when I got laid off at Schweitzer's, I went to work for Coaching Equipment right in the hometown where I lived at, which was Penn Yan. That was after I moved out of the house, and well, forced to move out of the house because what Dad said, and I covered that in the previous video. But it was interesting. It was very interesting. Coaching Equipment was vans for wheelchair victims that we had to take a regular van, straight from the factory, and modify it to so a guy without legs can actually use his hands to do the acceleration and the braking and getting on and getting off by using the lift, and wheel the wheelchair right behind the driver's steering wheel. And we installed air conditioning, 2 units, one in the front and one in the back, to cool the van off. Ran the wires underneath, undercoated it. I tell you what, that undercoating, modern. I mean, it was, they spent a lot of money undercoating those vans. I mean, those things were preserved. They're probably still rust-free, because up in New York, when they salt the roads, all that does is create rust. So, anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out, and about the same time Woodstock was going on. Well, Woodstock had already passed. I spent 12 days there. That was just before I started working for Schweitzer's. That's when Woodstock happened. And during the time of Schweitzer's and Penn Yan was the time of that ordeal down in Washington, D.C., where 100,000 people showed up to demonstrate against the war in Vietnam with old tricky Dick Nixon. So that's just more like scuttlebutt as to what I did before I went into the military. Because remember, when I moved out of the house, I was already Antichrist for 6 months, so I had to start building a career being a human being. I thought that was the way to go. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw this out. GP, yeah, past history. Anyways, yeah, I'll add this to the rest of them and see what happens. And you guys have a beautiful day, and we'll talk at you later. God bless.